Hey everyone, in this series we're going to help you level up your data analysis skills by rebuilding Excel's most commonly used functions in Elixir in order to reuse the Excel knowledge you already have. Today we're going to be looking at Excel's text length function. With that, let's get started. So first of all, before we jump in, what is Excel's length function? What does it do? Where can we find it? So if we jump over here to the right-hand side of my screen, I've got Excel's documentation up here. So let's Control F. Let's look for length. All right, so the length function, it says, returns the number of characters in a text string. Okay, so what does that look like? How does that work? So if we jump over here, I've put a simple example together where we've got 6 different data types and they're all using Excel's length function, right? But first of all, let's start with the hello world. So what is this doing? So what we're doing is we've just got a simple, we've got hello world typed, right? And then we pass it to the length function. And what the length function does is it will count the number of characters in that string and then return us the total count. And so sure enough, yep, it gives us 11. Perfect. But now, how would we build this in Elixir? Like, what's the Elixir equivalent? So if we jump over to Elixir's documentation, so first of all, there's a lot to take in here. Let's break it down. So in Elixir's documentation, if we go to the front page, you should see something like this. I'm thinking, kernel, what is? Well, most programming languages have what they call a standard library, which is like a core set of functions that that come with the language, where you don't have to import some other package or install anything else, right? It just comes when you install the language. All these functions come with it. So if we scroll down here, we can see, yep. Here's the standard library, and so what they're calling kernel, right, provides the basic capabilities the Elixir standard library is built on top of. Okay, so that's what we want. Now if we scroll down a little bit further, we'll see these things called types. What is types? So a type in Excel would be something like text, integer, decimal, date, time, or date time. One of those 6 would be the primary that we'll look at later. And so they've got a whole bunch of extra ones. So we could see something like, oh, float. Okay, float would be like a decimal. That would be the equivalent of decimal in Excel. But this isn't what we're looking for. We're looking for something that's going to count the length of what we need. So if we actually scroll down, these are extra data types. And so what they're saying right here, saying that these other data types are built on top of the types listed above. Basically, these are your base types. These are like the foundational building blocks for which these additional data types are built on top of. We can see date time, and the one we want to look at is string, which would be the equivalent of text in Excel. So if I click on string, it'll bring me right down to the page. Also notice we could have just scrolled down and see where it says basic types. You can click on string. If I click sections, it'll take me to the top of the page. And what it says is strings in Elixir are UTF-8 encoded binaries. What in the world does that mean? All it means is strings are just a collection of letters put together. That's really all it is for most purposes. And so, you know, there's a whole bunch more stuff talking about all the cool things you can do with strings. But what we really care about is if you scroll down here to the functions, I can just click on this little plus sign, and what it does is it lists, here are all the functions that that this strings module has. And so if we scroll down, we can see length. So if I click on length, this will actually tell me, okay, returns the number of Unicode graphemes in a UTF-8 string. Again, what it's going to do is just return the count of characters in a string. That's all it's saying. And see what we say here. In fact, they even give examples down here below. String.length, and you just pass whatever your string is, to it, and it counts the number of characters 6. I think this is what we want. So with that, let's jump over to the left side of our screen, or to the right side of our screen, excuse me, and let's, sorry, let me back up, where what I've got here is Excel or Elixir already loaded up, and we're going to use their Livebook package. And so Livebook is just an application they have where you can run some code. Say I wanted to do something like 5 right? And I can hit Control Enter, and it'll evaluate the code immediately. It'll run it just like you would a cell in Excel as soon as you hit Enter, right? It automatically calculates whatever you're trying to do. So in order to get this started, we're going to create what's called a module. Actually, let me back up. Let's jump back over to here so we know, make sure we're going to copy the same inputs. So first of all, we're going to so in Livebook, they've got, when you want to add some extra code, say I've got something in here, right? Like I want to create a module, which is just a collection of functions. So we're going to create a module text for all our text related functions. And so I want to just kind of quickly do some, I just want to try something out real quick before we make it formal. So we're going to do the hello world. And then actually let me do it like they do. So we'll do string dot, and notice as I start typing it out, it gives me auto completion, something super helpful, right? Just like you'd expect in Excel. So we can type string length, and what this is saying is, hey, it's expecting a string. So let's pass that string. And we're going to type hello world. If I can spell correctly, hello world. And then I'm going to hit Command Enter. And that gives us 11, which is exactly what we have over here. Perfect. That's what we needed. Now, I want to show you something cool that Elixir allows you to do, is we can actually take hello world out of this, and we're going to put a pipe operator in between hello world and the function we actually want to run. And so what is this doing? This is actually the exact same thing, or equivalent to what we just wrote, where it's going to take this string, and it's pipe operators, think of it like a plumbing, like pipe, right? It's just going to pass that string to the function we actually want it to run. And so if I rerun this, just Command Enter, perfect. We get the exact same answer. And the benefit here to using pipes is that we can put multiple functions back to back and create recipes. If again, like a pipe, right? We're trying to manipulate text, we're trying to transform data, right? And oftentimes we need to put we need to put multiple functions back to back to get the end result that we need. So this is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do up here, actually these are the 6 data types that we need to capture up here. So let's just go ahead and put them in. And so we've got actually, I forgot we actually need to write a function. So we use the def keyword, and that's just another word for function, to create a function. And so we're going to create the len function. Now notice in Elixir, I can't use a capital L. Capitals mean modules, which means collections of functions, and we're just trying to create an individual function. I know it sounds a little goofy probably right now, but you'll get used to it. It's very intuitive once you're used to it. So, all right, so we'll go ahead. So in our length function, we need to account for these 6 data types, right? And so what I'm saying is, okay, there's going to be some sort of input here, right, which is what we're passing over here. And so our input could be either text, like hello world. It could be an integer, like the number 5. It could be a decimal, also known as a float in Elixir, like 3.5. It could be a date, just like January 1st, 2022. a time like 3:56 a.m. or a date time, which is a combination of date and time. And so we want to make sure that we capture, that we account for each one of these. And I'll show you why in a sec. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to say is bitstring. And so bitstring, we're going to use this because it's just checking, hey, is it a string? That's what we're looking for. So what this says is if the input is a string, then we want to take the input and we want to count the length of that string with the string.length function. All right, so let's test that out. What do we do? Sorry, what we need to do first is create a conditional statement. And so the conditional statement, think of it is a giant if-then statement. And with that, and the benefit here is we can put a whole bunch of conditions in here without having to have, nested if-then statements like you would in Excel, like say 7 or 8 deep to cover all the conditions. So we'll just copy paste this. Let's cut that out. We'll put it in here. Just reformat it a little nicer. Okay, now let's rerun it. Perfect. So that worked. So now instead of using the string.length function, let's use the text.len function. Perfect. We get the same answer. Awesome. But notice what happens if you use the number 5, right? Over here in Excel, we should get 1, but if we try it, couldn't evaluate it because we don't have an answer for that. So 2 things we could do. A, we could just simply put a, say like a default. So, hey, if nothing else matches, then what we want you to do is we want you to just spit out, not sure of data type. And this could be whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm just putting in a default use case. So again, if we run this again, see, not sure of data type. Okay, so it's not giving us an error, but that's still not the answer we want. So if we go back up here, notice we need to handle the integer. So if we say is integer, and notice you get the text completion. So you could see all the different options of things you could check for, right? If it's a number, if it's a float, but what we're looking for is an integer. So if the input is an integer, then let's take the input and we're going to pass it to string.length. Okay, the code ran. So if we try it again, we're getting an error. If I get this out of the way. Oh, what's the problem? Oh, it said the following arguments were given to string.length. It was 5, but notice it wants a string. Okay, well that's a problem because we have an integer. So what do we need to do? So this is where we get the benefit of piping multiple functions together. So notice all we have to do here, we could simply say, oh, well, we have an integer and we want to convert that. And let me zoom out a little bit so you can see. We want to convert, or actually, you know what? Let's move this over here. That'd probably be a little bit better, wouldn't it? So let's zoom in. There we go. So let's take that integer and we're going to convert that to a string. And so we're going to take this integer, we'll convert it to a string, and then we'll count the length of the string. So let's try this again. If we scroll down, now it works. Now we got, yep, 5, just like in Excel, right? We pass 5 to length to give us 1. We do the exact same thing here. It gives us 1. Awesome. We're rocking and rolling. Okay, now let's work on handling these other use cases. Okay, so we need to cover decimal, date, time, and date time. So in order to do that, so let's see, is float. So float would be the equivalent to decimal. So is float, if the input is a float, then we want to take that input, and notice what we did it here. So we convert our integer string. So let's see if there's a float. Yep, sure enough, there's a float. Is there a two string? Exactly, that's what we need. So we're going to convert that float to a string, and we're going to take the string and count the length of it, just like we've done before. All right, now let's move on to, well, actually, before we do that, let's just double check, make sure it works. You never know. Oftentimes in coding, you think you've got the right answer, only to find out you don't. So let's just double check. Notice, okay, it says 3.5. Oh, did we recalculate? There we go. See, I didn't recompile my code, so we had to rerun our code. And then it's given us 3, which is exactly what we're getting over here in Excel. Another win. All right, so let's count for dates. So now notice when we scroll through this, right? There's nothing that says is date. There's no date in here that we could find. And so the reason is, if we go back over here to our documentation, so notice we've got this, let's go back to the main top, right? So here it's got these basic data types. Well, then we also had these extra data types. Remember date time? So these are added on. So there's not going to be a is date for us to check. So what we have to do is we look for is struct, which just means structure. They created a date structure. So we're going to say is struct, and so it's going to say look for the term, which is our input, and then we want to know the name of that structure. Well, we're looking for a date. See, it says right here date. It's a struct. That's exactly what we want. So if our input is a date, then let's take that input, and just like we've done before, we want to pass it to the date and convert that to a string, and then take our string and count the length. Let's rerun our code, double check ourselves with what it has in Excel. Now, to create, in order to test this, we need to create a date. So the simplest way is if we just go date.new, right? And notice what it's looking for. We need to pass it a year, a month, and a day. Okay, so if we go 2022, 01 for the month and 1 for the day. So let's see what this looks like without passing it to the function. By the way, use a £sign when you want to comment something out, right? So see how it grayed all this out? That means none of this code will run. So if we run that, yep, it gives us a date back, 2022-01-01 or January 1st, 2022. So now let's uncomment that little bit of code out, and let's run this and see what it looks like. Perfect. So it gave us 10. Now wait, that's different than 5 here in Excel. Why is that? So if we notice over here in Excel, what it's actually doing is converting our date into an integer, which is actually the number of days since January 1st, 1900. Don't worry about finding it. I'll put a link in the description below. But what you can see is this is actually, see, I've just made E5 equal to B5. But what I've done is I've just changed the the format to date, whereas this is let's make it number. There we go. So I've changed the date format to a number format, and so this is what it's doing, is it's then counting the number of digits in this number, right? Which, so going from 40, so 44562, that's five digits in that number. But what's happening here in Elixir? So one of the really cool things about Elixir is how you can check out parts of code when you're in this process of building. So what do I mean by that? Well, so what we can do, and I'm just going to bring this down here just to make it a little easier to see. So I can say, okay, let's convert that date to string, and then we want to use this IO module, and that stands for input output, and we're going to go inspect. That's just another way of saying, hey, just print this answer out so I can see what it's doing. So we're going to convert our date to string, then we're going to print it out, and then we'll convert it to string, then we'll count the string length. So now let's check down below, let's see what's actually happening. So notice that when we convert our date to string, it's literally just turning it into a string. It's not changing it into a number like Excel's doing. And so if you count the number of digits here, including the hyphens, or the number of characters, including the hyphens, it actually is 10. And so that's how we're getting to 10 here in Elixir as opposed to 5 in Excel. And so what we're going to find out is we actually have similar issues here with the time and date time, because Excel converts both of these. Well, time it converts to a decimal or a percentage of the day, whereas date time it does the combination of both. The number of days since January 1st, 1900 with the decimal added on representing the percent of the day completed. So now that we figured that out, let's keep doing the same thing. Again, remember, back in our documentation, right, we've got date time, but we also have time. Time is, again, one of these extra data types. So in order to check for it, we're going to say is struct. We're going to say if the input, and we want to check to see if it's a time. And if I can type correctly, if that input is a time, then we want to pass it to the time struct, and we want to convert that to a string. And then let's convert that, then let's take that string and convert it, or count the length. Again, to make it easier, I'm just going to put these down. I'm just going to change the formatting a little bit. And notice how, as we're building these out, how we can put one function after another. Again, it's almost like a cake recipe, right? Okay, we've got some raw ingredients, right? And then we want to do something with the eggs. We want to do something with the butter. We want to do something with the oil, right? And then we want to mix these things together, bake it, and then you've got a cake at the very end, right? In a very similar fashion, that's exactly what we're doing here, is by building these little mini pipelines, these little mini recipes that will comprise a much bigger recipe to allow you to do whatever analysis you need to do. Where was I? Okay, so yes, and actually let's go ahead and copy and paste this inspect function, this print function. And so what we're going to do down here is I'm going to save that date for later because we're going to need it. So I'll just comment that out. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to time.new to create a new time. And notice we need to give it an hour, a minute, and a second. So so if I go back to Excel, what did we have? It was the hours 3, 56 minutes, and 0 seconds. And so if we run this, oh, I probably forgot to run my code. Let's clean this up for a sec. Let's rerun that. There we go. So again, notice the result is 8, whereas Excel is 17. So why is that? Well, remember, Excel is converting our time to a decimal, which represents the percent of the day completed. And so if you come over here and you actually spent the time counting all the digits that are listed right here, that's actually 17. So that's how it turns 3:56 a.m. into the number 17. Whereas Elixir, on the other hand, is actually just converting it to a literal string, and then we're just counting the number of characters in that string, which again is 8, right? So we got 2, 4, 6, and 2 colons, 8. So we've solved that. Let's clear this up a bit. Okay, yes, so going back to our date. So we're going to do the exact same thing, because again, if you notice, there's no is date time here because these are all base types. Again, going back to the documentation, it's in one of these extra data types, date time, that's what we're looking for. So we're going to say is struct, is it a structure? Is our input a structure that's a date time? And if it is, then we want to, I'll just go ahead and put it down here. We're going to take our inputs. We want to take that input and convert it from a date time to a string, which is down here. We'll do the same thing. Let's look at the output. Done inspect. And then let's do and then we'll take the result and we'll count the string length. All right, so let's rerun our code. Now let's come down here. Again, I'm going to save this. Oh, I'm going to reuse this date time, or this time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say we need a datetime.new. And so what we need to do is notice we need to pass it a date, which we have here, and a time, which we just created in the last section. So I'm going to open this up. We will copy and paste this, or cut and paste. So there's our date. Here is our time. All right, and before we run this, I'm going to comment it out. Let's check it out. Yep, so notice it's combining our date plus our time, and the Z means it shows us what where it is in the world, right? So this would be UTC time. And so let's go ahead and check this now. 20. Again, notice Excel gives us 16. Why is that? Well, again, it's taking this date and comparing it, counting the number of days since January 1st, 1900, and then it's taken the 356 that we passed it and converting it, right? Remember this decimal right here? So it's then adding that on to the end of this number of days, which we've got right here. And so this is actually the date time that Excel generates. And if you count the number of digits, it truly is 16. Whereas over here in Elixir, again, just like it's done with date, time, and date, it converted it to a literal string, didn't transform it at all into any numbers and integers or whatnot, and then just simply counted the number of digits in this string, which sure enough is 20. And so with that, before we wrap up, there's one thing I'd like to do, because in programming, you'll often hear the phrase, don't repeat yourself, or dry. And what they mean is, hey, if you write code more than twice, rewrite it so that you're not repeating yourself multiple times, because then when you do that, it gets hard to update and to maintain. Think of this as like an Excel workbook, right? Where instead of having one input, if you have that same input in 3 different sheets, right? That's now 3 different places that you'll need to update that information when it needs to be updated, right? As opposed to just linking them all to the one input so that you can change it in one place and it flows throughout the rest of your workbook. So what we're going to do here, notice what we've got. We've got this string length used on every single one of these functions. And so what we can do is, let's change this up a little bit. We'll create let's redo the length function. So we'll say def input. Again, def input. Def is how we create a function. And then you want to put do, and then it automatically auto-completes, puts end for me. So this is a proper way to write a function in Elixir. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say input, and then I want to pass it to this function I haven't created, but we will in a sec. And I'm going to say convert to string. Okay, I want to pass that input there, and then what I want to do is I want to take that input and then count the string dot length. Perfect. And so now what I'd like to do here is we can get rid of all of these string dot lengths using a quick little cheat code. We can go Command D, copy paste all of them, and notice how it's highlighted all 6 of these. I can just hit enter or backspace, and they're all gone. So I don't need to do that anymore. And so what we're going to do now is change this name to convert to string. And so now the convert to string will simply be this function's job will only be to check what is the data type. If it's a string, pass it on. If it's not, convert it to a string, and then we'll count the string length. So if I come down here, let's just scroll back over. Let's rerun our code, and then let's see if it still works. Does it still work with our date time? Yes. And just to make sure, does it still work with our hello world that we initially started off with? Yep, perfect. So that's exactly what we needed. In the next video, what we're going to be looking at is Excel's text find function. So we'll be building off what we've done here with the text length function and figuring out how to rebuild Excel's text find function. All right, well, that's all we have for today, guys, for Excel's text length function and how to rewrite that or rebuild it in Elixir. If you found this content helpful, please like and subscribe. If you want to support the channel, please go check out TitanDealHub.com. And all the links for the content in the video will be linked in the description box below. If you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, please share them in the comments. Would love to engage, help in whatever way possible. Thanks so much for your time, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.